Hey everybody, Joe Tierney here. You may know me better as Gentleman Toker. I started the gentlemantoker.com website in Washington, D.C. back in 2016 to help people find the best weed in the city. The point of this podcast is very much the same. I am going to teach you how to find the best weed no matter what market you happen to find yourself in the United States, and hopefully soon even beyond that. But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. We're going to start with teaching you guys about how to find weed in Washington, D.C. and some of your best options here. I am joined today by Liz Whiting.
Hey, everyone.
Thank you. She's going to be our co-host today. Liz, tell them about yourself.
Hey, everyone. I'm Liz Whiting. I am first and foremost, weed connoisseur as well.
Indeed.
I do enjoy cannabis.
You partake?
I partake. I have specifically partaken in DC.
Partook?
These are my old stomping grounds. I'm over in LA now, but I go back and forth, and it's always really amazing to see where DC started and where it is now and where it's going. What am I? I had to think about my intro a little bit. I've worn many hats. I had my own consulting, quote unquote, micro agency, essentially me doing everything.
I'm familiar with the concept.
Yeah, for clients in DC. I then went to work with Daily High Club for almost 5 years, and I helped lead all their marketing. They were actually recently acquired. I now work with other amazing brands like Gentleman Toker and others to create content, to build out their marketing. I also do content on my own and have a podcast called Send Us Flowers.
Nice. Do people send you flowers?
They do, but probably not the traditional kind.
Right. That sounds like a great idea. You send us flowers too. We'll
take anything you have.
Fantastic. Liz is an integral part of the Gentleman Toker team. As we were saying, I also did everything by myself for a while, and now I don't, which is great.
We love not doing things by ourselves. Teamwork really makes the dream work. And if you need some camaraderie, you're like, oh my gosh, I don't have to just talk to myself about things.
So, why don't we get right into it? So today, like I said, we're talking about Washington, D.C. and how you can find weed here. In the previous episodes, we kind of discussed how Initiative 71 works and how that's grown. Today, we're going to get into like the nitty gritty of it and the specifics. So the obvious place for me to start is storefronts. We've had Initiative 71 storefronts throughout the last 5 years, but in general, they didn't last long. They would be raided quite often, I worked with ones early on that were only around for like 3 months, 4 months, something like that before they had to pack it in. They also had issues with their like commercial landlords at the time.
Of course.
When they found out what was going on, it was very hard to secure a space to start off with. And if they found out what was going on, they would certainly kick them out. So I've definitely had last minute calls from brands that I know. They're like, oh yeah, we got to go find a new place today because we
have an address change. We would like to set up a mail forwarding address through Gentleman Toker.
Absolutely. So it's been, it's been challenging to run a cannabis business under Initiative 71, and kudos to everybody that has tried and stuck with it, and despite all the ups and downs of it. But that doesn't help you. You want to know where to go get weed. So what essentially
they're like,
happened,
don't tell us about the places that are closed.
Right. Essentially, what we're looking at now is during the coronavirus pandemic, that's when things really changed. So commercial landlords facing, people not coming into the offices anymore, and they were having trouble renting out their spaces. And the only people that were open and able to provide rent were Initiative 71 brands. So we saw a complete flip during the pandemic, and I've even heard from brands that were encouraged by their landlords. Like, they didn't know they ran an I-71 already.
Right.
And then they came out and were like, hey, you guys should really think about running an I-71 store.
Yeah.
Now we have dozens of stores and more popping up across the city every day.
Well, and cannabis was deemed essential as well over the course of the pandemic.
It was. And I think that's a really important point, is that, the government declared that the medical marijuana facilities were essential. And by that, I also took that to mean that Initiative 71 brands were also essential. It wasn't specifically spelled out like that. But
what in cannabis ever is.
But I think it is. They certainly didn't want to cut off access to everyone that uses the I-71 market. Again, we've talked that there's lots of good reasons for not getting a medical marijuana card. So they didn't want to cut all those people off in the middle of the pandemic. Right. So today we've got dozens of storefronts, and, we call them storefronts, but it really is a dispensary. We call them storefronts because they have to comply with Initiative 71 gifting rules. Therefore, they can't actually sell you cannabis. That's why we shy away from actually calling them a dispensary. But Liz, you've been to several of these shops. How do they stack up against the ones that you've seen in other markets?
I've been to a lot in LA. I've been to Denver. I've been to a few other places, New York, and it's very similar. I do love it, though, because there is this art component, or there is another component where, if you go to LA, most dispensaries now look like an Apple store. It's pretty, robust in how they've built that out. It also depends on the branding, etc. But when I-71 was really popping up in DC, I was still here. And so I got to experience the very, very early days of that, where I would go into the store on 18th Street that had grow equipment, and I'd get a T-shirt.
Right. Yeah.
Do you know which one I'm talking about?
I know exactly which one you're talking about.
And it was like, a nudge, nudge, wink, wink. I'd like a T-shirt, please. And they'd be like, I got you. And so that's how it went. That's how you would pick stuff up. And I remember first doing it, I was like looking over my shoulder. I was like, is someone watching? It's the whole, it was surreal. It was really surreal to me, because every time I'd picked up before that, I went to University of Maryland. I would go to a friend, but they'd be out. I'd pick up from like my high school brother's dealer that lived in his mom's basement. You couldn't just go to a store and pick out a T-shirt, for audio listeners, doing finger quotes. But it's really progressed. It's crazy to see where it is now 5 years later. These stores are so robust. They have amazing branding. You go to Gifted Curators, there's art on the walls, there's an amazing team. They greet you when you walk in. It really doesn't feel like this, gritty thing. You go to Legacy, it's stunning. All the walls are decorated. They have graffiti and very tasteful art and placements. It's really in a different place than it was before. Absolutely.
Then the DC artists have really embraced the Initiative 71 brands too, because you can see murals from Anikin on the Garden and New Kids Aloud, which was like my jaw dropped, because I really love Anikin Udofa's work, and seeing it, on the walls of an Initiative 71 brand.
The Garden is stunning. I loved visiting there. I was so impressed.
And they've got great parking, which is important to me.
God. When we pulled up and there was parking, I was like, come on. What, you don't have parking in
Absolutely.
DC ever?
Yeah, no, even if you were to visit like the medical facilities, they rarely have parking. Tacoma
Right.
Wellness has like a parking lot and it is very tight.
Yeah.
But you touched on a few of our favorite brands. So here's why we like the storefronts. The storefronts, again, they're pretty much just like a dispensary. So if you're just looking to come to the city, pick something up, and walk away, and you want to feel really safe about it throughout the process, storefronts is the ideal situation for you. I know
I would
with
agree.
some of the other types of ways that people are gifting cannabis in I-71 may not be really may not feel super safe if you were like a woman alone or something like that. I've gotten lots of emails over the years of like, this guy wants me to come up to a hotel. Is that legit? And I'm like, I totally understand why you would be uncomfortable.
Right. Maybe bring a friend.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like bring a friend or hit up a delivery service or go to a storefront. But like, don't put yourself in that position if you feel uncomfortable. That being said, a lot of people did it for a long time. So it was, it worked out just fine.
Yeah, it definitely adds a layer of trust. Like the entire the entire experience really does, because you like from the very moment that you need or want cannabis, you go to your phone, of course, and you type in where to find weed in DC. Gentleman Toker pops up. You can pick out Legacy, Gifted, Garden, No Kids Allowed. There's a long list of places to pick from now that have trustworthy people and trustworthy product. You can look up on Google Maps where it is. Like all those little details are huge. There's no it's like finding Chipotle.
Yeah.
And so for me, that really makes a difference, especially for newcomers into the space, because they don't, a casual consumer may not want the underground experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is what people thought they were voting for when Initiative 71 was voted in. They thought they were going to get dispensaries. So, there's lots of good reasons to utilize the storefronts. One other reason is, with a lot of the other types of services, you have to send them a picture of yourself holding your ID. And that makes a lot of people uncomfortable. They don't want to share their identification online. They wonder what's happening to it, what kind of security is happening on the back end to ensure that their information doesn't get out there. So if you have any concerns as far as that goes, maybe you're building secret jets for Lockheed or something, right?
There are. We live in DC. Like the federal, when I was living here, and I say this with all due respect, but it is so hard to break out from that shadow of, there is such a thriving arts and culture, music scene in DC, and I feel like it will always have that kind of fog of federal government over it. And, you have a ton of people who they're not allowed to consume. Right. So they can't put, their name in a database. They can't have all of their information out there, but they should have that alternative instead of, whatever else, if you have to take this kind of medication, there's no judgment, but to have the alternative option that is not opioids, that is not, pharmaceuticals, this is a more natural way to, if you want to treat something or heal or just enjoy it, it's a way for people to be able to do that without sharing, every single bit of information about them and putting it online.
If you're a federal employee, you can't even, it's a risk even to try CBD.
Yeah. Because
the percentage that's listed on the bottle may not be tested accurately, and you could fail a drug test based on CBD. I've seen stories about that.
Select just had a huge issue where they mislabeled a bunch of their bottles. And that's a huge brand. They had ones that they had to do a gigantic recall. This was really recently too. Yeah. And so, there's just things like that can happen. And it's really important to be able to go to a physical place, have an experience that may be a little bit more private, but is also more trustworthy, And these storefronts give that to people.
Absolutely. Now, there's one challenge with the storefronts, and that is, due to Initiative 71 rules and them trying to comply to those rules, a lot of them only gift like an eighth at a time. And there's no quantity of scale as you would typically see where price is reduced when you get a quarter or a half or an ounce or more. So if you're looking for value and you want to maximize what you can get for your dollars, storefronts may not be the best option for you. But they also sometimes have some designer stuff, and if you want the fancy stuff, you can go there. If you want to spend, you can.
It's definitely for an elevated consumer, I would say too.
I heard recently that like somebody popped into one of these shops and just bought like 13 eighths. Like, so like
we wanted to stock up. Hey, it's Green Wednesday is coming up. Everyone's going back with their families. They're like, I need all of it.
Oh, absolutely. We always get calls and social media things around the holidays, and they're like, hey, who's open? Like, 'cause I'm with my family and I need to get high right now.
I need to go for a walk. Yeah, no, exactly. It's just to move into some other options, like I do love delivery for those purposes. If you do need it to come to you, you can't step out, you're with the family and you need something still discreet though, that's a great way to go. Actually, so funny story, I really wanted to get into the cannabis industry years ago. I have endometriosis, and I found that cannabis really, really helped in treating my symptoms. It really helped with my inflammation. It helped me be able to eat, and a wealth of other things. And so I was like, not only do I want to consume a lot of cannabis, I want to make sure a lot of other people can safely consume cannabis. And so I started ordering from like the juice delivery services, like the cookie delivery services. And every time the delivery driver would come, I'd be like, do you actually work with the company? Like, are you hiring? Like, I would just straight up ask the delivery drivers.
No kidding.
And one time I got the CEO of one of the companies. He was like, and if you're in cannabis, you understand this. If you are high, like quote unquote, high up in your company, you're doing the work. Like, you're boots on the ground. And so this guy was like, oh yeah, I'm actually the owner of this company. And I was like, I do marketing. I think you could use some help. So I started. Nice. And so that's how I started. And then I had another friend talk about, the fact that I wanted to be in the industry with other people. And I was connected then with Daily High Club. And then I had worked with them for so long. And so I literally, got your
start from I-71?
I got my start from I-71.
No kidding.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
I know, honestly, I hadn't really thought about that until this podcast.
Well, like Initiative 71 has launched so many careers and entrepreneurs. It really has been a beneficial piece of legislation for Washington, D.C. So we're certainly hopeful that as the council is considering the future of cannabis, that they consider keeping us around in some form. It would be a shame to see all this go away. I also got my start under Initiative 71, and then I just stayed here.
Yep.
I did threaten to leave many times. I was like, I'm going out to Colorado. I hired somebody else to write your reviews in DC, and it never worked out, and I always had to come back and do it myself.
Yep, of course. No, it's really incredible what it started. And so, and to speak more, so the juice thing, for those who don't know, it's the same situation as the storefronts. When you order, I can't just go online and order cannabis. I have to pick out a juice or a cookie. And by the way, they were incredible juices. They were fresh pressed. They had charcoal. I remember. They were really nice, and the cookies were really nice. There's also the Def Can delivery. I don't know if they're still around, but it was people from Gallaudet.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that was super impressive, right?
That was like one of the most robust early delivery services I think I had experienced. Because you could even see the map.
It's District of C. They're not around anymore.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, they from what I heard, they were trying, they were very successful early on, but couldn't figure out how to ramp up to the level that they needed to get real financing and continue to grow the brand. So I think they ended it. I don't know the intimate details of that, but it was sad to see them go because they were awesome early on.
It was really cool.
And the juices were great. And I know that the fresh baked cookies were all really good.
Cookies were really good.
So yeah, in case you hadn't caught the first podcast, so what we do in DC is instead of being able to buy the cannabis directly, you have to buy something else, and then you get the cannabis as a free thank you gift for patronizing this new startup. And we've seen all kinds of crazy schemes over the years. I know one of my favorite that I heard were these folks that would deliver an inspirational speech to you. So you would book a speech and they'd show up on a scooter.
What?
And they could I think they were flexible about it. Like they'll tell you a joke or, they could just tell you to hang in there, kitty. And here's your weed. And you can't put a price on that.
No, you can't. That's priceless.
Right. Like, how could you possibly say that's not valuable? Like, it literally is valuable as they want it to be. You can hire someone to come and inspire you today. So that was one of my favorites. Just touching back on the storefronts briefly, there was Street Lawyer. That was one of the ones that I was super impressed with, where he would give out legal coupons, so that you could get some discount on any legal services that you might need, and then he would gift the cannabis on top of that. So we've seen some really cool schemes. But getting back onto delivery, the main point for delivery for me as to why you might want to go that route is if you are trying to maximize what you can get for your money, right?
Great deals.
With the deliveries, they really do offer economy of scale as you'd expect for quarter, half ounce, and also to I'm losing the thread. What else is good about the delivery companies?
Yeah, so with delivery, another thing that I think is really, really cool is that you can maximize your time. You don't have to go out and be somewhere. You can just have it come to you, especially since so many of us work from home right now. Yeah. I mean, even when I'm in DC just to visit, I will use the delivery service and have it come to me because I know I can just have it show up at my door. And a lot of them are really, really robust in how they let you know, when you're coming. It's not like before where you would wait in a parking lot for 6 hours and hope someone shows up. Like, they are coming to your door.
Yeah, and that's another good point is that,
it's way more reliable.
Early on, it may have been, as people were getting their feet under them, it could take, hours and hours to get a delivery and stuff like that. But now it's so competitive and the market is so saturated with these brands that they really have to stand out. So you should expect to receive, an ETA when you place your order. You should expect follow-up text letting you know that the driver is about to be there. And they've really got it down in terms of timing. If you order during the daytime when things aren't as busy, you'll probably get your package in an hour. If it's later on in the evening, getting towards happy hour and so on, and traffic picks up, it might be 2 hours. But when I've traveled, when I've been to New York City as somebody without a connect there, it was, regularly 3-4 hours for a delivery. New Jersey, because they have to deal with such a wide geographic area, you had to set things up 24 hours or more in advance.
DC is really, it's a small city when you think about it. It's it's very walkable. And so I know for some delivery services, they would even do it on their bikes or a scooter or something like that. And they just bam, 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 drop off after drop off. And it's really easy. It's just super easy. And if you want delivery again, you just go to Google. There's no secret really anymore. It's not you have to go find the person. You go to Google, you find Gentleman Toker, and there's a list of trustworthy places to pick from. And the contacts are all there, the websites are there, the phone numbers are there. it's so much easier today than it used to be. I really say that truly from experience. Like, I'm looking at Joe right in the eye, like, it's so much easier.
Well, I take care to vet the services and make sure that they are professional, and that the gifts are good quality.
Yeah.
So if you go off the ones that I've already checked out, I guarantee you're going to have a good time. And, there's plenty of other brands out there. So, like, feel free to explore. You find one that you like, let me know. Shoot me an email. Some of our favorite brands as far as delivery goes, I really like Exotic Organics. They often have a lot of those designer flowers and the new stuff that's coming out. But they don't charge as much as you might find that stuff for elsewhere. So it tends to be pretty reasonable. Royale Dankness is good. Lucky Chucky is good.
I've heard great things about Lucky Chucky.
And super reliable. Like, it's all a very mature market at this point, and again, very competitive. So you can absolutely expect to have top-notch service hitting up these delivery brands that I've personally vetted. I can't promise what your experience is going to be if you go off of my lighted path, but have fun and let me know how it goes.
Yeah, and now on Gentleman Toker, I mean, I'm going to, shamelessly plug this. You can now leave reviews. And so, I mean, your reviews are obviously amazing, but we can hear other people's reviews too. And so if other people have had these, wonderful experiences and can share it with others, I think that's so cool now. And then I did want to move on to something that you had mentioned too. And maybe it's not exactly this, but the meetups. And when you had mentioned like meeting someone in a hotel room, which maybe is not the way you would want to always do it. But, meetups in DC, that is another way that people have been able to procure cannabis.
Sure. So, the terminology is a little loose. People will use the terms pickups and meetups for different things.
Yeah.
The way that I use it is if we're talking about pickup, that's where I'm talking about you're actually going to be invited into a physical space to check out products and stuff like that. Whereas meetups is the term that I use if you're just going to meet someone. So like delivery, you tell them where you want them to go.
Right.
With a meetup, it's like a mutual thing. Like they'll give you an address that you can go meet them up, which is great for people that are unfamiliar with the city.
Yeah.
Because I get lots of emails like that too. Like, hey, I'm coming in from this direction. Who's the easiest person to meet up with?
Yeah. Yep.
All right. We were talking about meetups and so these terms are kind of interchangeable. There hasn't been like, it's not like everyone in the community came together and decided to discuss, how they would be using these words.
It's not in Webster's dictionary.
You're going to see like different things altogether. But when I'm talking about pickups, I'm talking about what we're essentially proto storefronts. So I had mentioned that, we've had storefronts since the beginning, but people kind of moved into this hybrid situation before the coronavirus allowed these storefronts to proliferate, where they set up a dispensary experience for you, but it was set up inside of a hotel room or an Airbnb or an apartment or something like that. You'd have to make an appointment. There's still a few people that run this way because it's a matter of risk reward, right?
Right.
So when you have a storefront, you are advertising for the Metropolitan Police Department to stop by whenever they'd like to re-up on cash and drugs. So like, with a pickup situation where your location is private, you have a lot more security as far as that goes.
Right.
Of course, the other problem with that is then you're also worried about being robbed. So it's like, who do you want to be robbed by? Do you want to be robbed by the Metropolitan Police Department or like criminals? So that's kind of like the balancing act that people had to take. But there's still a few people that run their services this way. And I think they're kind of, because they've been successful for so long and they're worried about the exposure of running a storefront.
Of course. Yeah. And I mean, way lower overhead.
Absolutely. Sure.
Way lower overhead. So have you experienced them offering better prices just because, or no?
Yeah. I mean, it's similar to delivery. Like you would
Right.
expect the pricing to be pretty reasonable and in lines of the quantity of scale that you would expect. I've also seen like some really hot designer concentrates and flowers from pickup services. So some of these pickup boutiques are still doing a fantastic job. Green Kings is one of the favorite ones that I like to bring up. They do fantastic flowers all the time. And then there's people like Puff Kings who run a more meetup style where they give you an address and then you go meet them. But they also do fantastic, for Puff Kings, for me personally, they do those THC to CBD edibles. And I think that just totally enriches the experience.
The ratio, yeah.
It really makes it evens out, the distillate, which I find to be really binary. It either works or it doesn't.
Yeah.
And when it works, it's very strong. Mm-hmm. So it kind of evens that out and makes the whole thing work longer. So I'm a big fan of Puff Kings and their meetup service. We're not seeing so many new ones come on today. Most people today realize that to be competitive in this market, you have to open up a storefront.
Right.
That brings you up to speed with what's currently going on in DC. We also had pop-ups in the early days.
Oh, I loved those.
So
I think loved those.
Everybody did. It was basically like...
That was my whole Friday night.
It was a farmer's market. Oh, yeah. And they was, early on...
Yeah, like a club.
You'd start to see them, on like Sunday, Monday, Tuesday night. But as things progressed and people saw that there was a potential to make money this way... they were happening every night of the week and multiple times over the weekend. Yeah, I agree. I spent, Fridays where we would just crawl from one pop-up to another.
Oh my God, I probably like cross paths with you at some point during that time because we like some of my friends and I, we would go to H Street and then we would go hit up, one of the pop-ups. You would pay $20 or $15 or $10, whatever, like they're kind of quote unquote cover charges. You go in and there is just tables and tables and tables of every type of product you could imagine. Lotions, joints, flour, just slabs of wax and shatter. It was
dab bars.
Like dab bars. I remember that was when I first started getting really into dabbing and I had no clue what I was doing. We can go down that route another day. But it was really cool. And then we'd all go get dumplings after at like Copycat or something if it's even still open. But I loved it. It was really, really fun. It was a cool way to meet a lot of people in the community too. It was a huge just gathering of really fun people.
Yeah, absolutely. It was it functioned on a couple of different levels. So for the vendors and the brands, it was essentially a farmer's market of weed. You would show up to a restaurant, club, what have you, and get to go between tables and check out what they had and then decide on what you want. I've lost the thread again. We were talking about pop-ups and some of the early days there. Farmers market for the vendors and customers, but it also served that other function of being a place where people could gather socially. And that was really important, especially in the early days of I-71.
Yeah.
I felt like, people were coming out of the cannabis closet.
Oh, 1,000%. That's why like my Instagram name, and so many people in the industry do this or just who consume cannabis, but I changed my Instagram name away from my name because I started posting about cannabis. And so you have a ton of people in the community that can actually come together and it not be so anonymous and it not be this like underground seedy thing, because when you end up meeting a ton of cannabis people, they're all pretty chill, honestly, for the most part.
Yeah.
And so, especially in DC, you see more of this, especially now opening up like lounges and things like that, which is still so surreal. But there weren't really ways to meet up with other cannabis consumers, especially in real life. Like online, yes. But in real life, no.
One of the only ways to do that, especially before Initiative 71, was to volunteer for an organization like Normal or something like that. I strongly considered doing that early on.
Women grow.
Ended up with DCMJ in the early days after I-71 passed, and hung out with those guys a bit. But the pop-ups were a great opportunity for the community to finally come together, meet each other.
Yeah.
I keep telling people, like, I feel like we've been rubbing elbows for years, right? Like, some of us had the same dealers. We had to have.
Right,
I met one guy at a pop-up that was in the same band that I was in.
Oh, that's epic.
So,
It's a small world when you really start delving into it. And as we mentioned, DC is a small city.
Yes.
It really is. And so these pop-ups really served as, it gave people jobs, it gave people sales, it gave people community, it gave people camaraderie, and really allowed a different level of the cannabis community to thrive in a way it really was not able to before. And so now you see things on a much grander scale, and you'll see us again this year as a part of NCF, but like National Cannabis Festival, that's been going on for years now, which is incredible. And you see these larger scale events that really are proponents of the community and allow people to come together in much larger ways than was ever feasible before. And so it's pretty incredible to see, especially someone being from DC, from this area, and being an East Coaster, we have really struggled.
Sure.
And so, to some extent, at least compared to where the West Coast is, and how open they can be. And so I do think it's incredible to see what I-71 has done over the years, to see, the options that people now have, to see websites like Gentleman Toker being able to give people options. I mean, we have options.
It's great having options.
We have options. That's crazy. And vetted, trusted options. You have the storefronts, you have deliveries. The pop-ups don't happen as much anymore, but you have places where you can go meet up and look at product. It's incredible to see the amount of ways you can find trustworthy cannabis in DC.
Yeah, I did want to put a bow on the pop-ups, and so once we got you guys super excited about how cool they were, they're gone for the most part. So what happened was, they had to advertise, and the Metropolitan Police Department decided to stop by a lot of these. So they end up busting a lot of these, and you don't want to be at a party when it's being raided by the police.
It's not fun, I can tell you from experience. It's a pretty weird time.
I was super lucky. I never got caught in. I definitely walked right out as the police were coming in a couple times.
Same. They would clear. I mean, it was like being at a house party. People just yell cops, and everyone scrambles, and I'm just like, am I in a Seth Rogen film? Is this?
Oh man,
it's really it was quite the experience. But yes, that was a fond memory. I'm glad we could share that. I really do think we must have been at some of the same ones together. But
I'm sure once the enforcement kicked up, then I stopped going myself, and I stopped advising other people to go because for that same reason, you just don't want to be there when it falls apart.
You want to use the safer options, and today those are first and foremost the storefronts, delivery, and pickups.
Yeah. So, you guys tuned in because you wanted to find out how to find weed in DC. I assumed that you didn't just tune in to hear me laugh. And I think we've accomplished that, right? So, some of our favorite storefronts, like Legacy, like Gifted Curators, Peace in the Air, The Garden, No Kids Allowed, and more coming on all the time. They're a great option. If you're just visiting, you're not super familiar, you just want to grab an eighth or two, that's a fabulous option that eliminates a lot of the risk that comes with some of the other services. But the The delivery is also a great option. Again, you've got Exotic Organics, Lucky Chucky, you've got Royale Dankness, Fat Buds, people that are really reliable and are going to have your order to you very quickly and discreetly. And then there's still a couple of pop-up options. So, pickup options like Green Kings and Puff Kings that you might want to look into. So there are so many ways to find weed in Washington, D.C. It's also the case that if you have your medical card from out of state, you can visit the medical marijuana dispensaries that are in D.C. They accept cards from every program in the country.
I don't think I knew that.
Yeah, that's really one of the best reasons. Like, if you would consider getting a medical marijuana card, that's one of my favorite reasons to do so, because having a medical marijuana card meant that I could get weed when I flew out to Hawaii.
Oh,
because they have a reciprocity program.
Got it. Yeah, not many states do that. Or at least not anymore.
Not a lot. And as recreational becomes bigger and bigger, there's less need for it.
Exactly.
But if you do have your card and you are visiting the nation's capital, you do have the option of hitting up the medical marijuana dispensaries. I know that most people tuning in probably aren't going to go that avenue, but that's a perfectly valid and great avenue to check out too.
Yeah. We should be clear about this, because a lot of people do ask me, you don't need a medical card to go into I-71 stores.
That's correct.
So many people do say, they're like, oh, well, I can't go into DC and get. You can. You don't need. All you need is your state ID to prove your age.
Yeah, we can talk a quick minute about some of the finer points of these services. Yeah. You don't need to be a resident.
Nope.
You do not need a medical marijuana card. Be super careful if anybody asks you to pay up front. In the early days of I-71, some people took credit cards and some people do Venmo and stuff like that. Overall, like the Cash App and Venmos and stuff, eventually they'll cut you off if you're a brand. So not so many of them do that anymore, but certainly be very careful if anybody's asking you to send payment in advance over a service that you can't reverse that. Mm-hmm. The ones that I recommend, I've all vetted as reliable. I know there's a lot of other reliable services out there, but it is the Wild West, and you should seek to protect yourself. And most people just aren't going to ask you to pay in advance.
No, and again, like if you go to a storefront, if you do, one of especially the vetted delivery systems, it's going to be a much more trustworthy experience.
Absolutely. So now that you know the ins and outs of getting your cannabis in DC, I want to thank you guys.
Get out there.
Yeah.
Go grab your weed.
Go get some weed. I really appreciate you guys tuning in to the Gentleman Toker podcast. I want to thank Liz for being here with me today, Liz Whiting.
This was great.
Absolutely. I'm a fabulous host.
You did. I'm an okay guest.
You've been great, and I really appreciate you coming on. And again, appreciate all you guys listening. So if you're interested in what we're going to talk about next, I believe the next episode we're going to get into New York City and some of the ins and outs of how to get weed there using the gifting services while they're still waiting for their recreational shops to open up. So the gentleman has some advice for you there. Please stay tuned for that, and onward and upward, folks. We'll talk to you next time.
Thanks, everyone. Oh, and Joe, okay, if you all have, your own experiences to share, we're of course on social media. I have to plug our social media. And so,
I'm terrible at plugging things. No, I'm just like, here's a bunch of information.
I'm like, hey, everyone. By the way, share with us on social. We love hearing everyone's different stories and sharing them and having that camaraderie. Again, this really is based in community, and Joe's created such a wonderful community here in DC. So if you've tried these shops, or if you have old memories of, prior to I-71 or early I-71 days, we'd love to hear them on Twitter, Instagram, at Gentleman Toker. You can find us and share your lovely times of trying to find weed before Gentleman Toker. Now it's a little easier, but I have stories. You heard some of them, Joe. I'm sure you have so many stories of some odd places and things you've done to find cannabis.
No, I have no stories. None. Yeah, absolutely. Please check us out on social media too, and join the conversation. So again, thank you guys so much. We'll talk to you next time.